Hey, I'm Bunse, and this is my series on AI. Today, I talk about why I believe that most organizations should not be investing in AI right now. This is 100% not because AI isn't useful or that it's overhyped, etc., although I think that there is certainly a bubble that is going to burst quite dramatically at some point in the next 2 years. But most organizations are simply not ready for it, and spending money on something that you are not going to use is a colossal waste of both time, energy, and motivation of your people as well as of money. So, here's the 5 ways that I think you will know that you are not ready for an AI investment. Number one, your data is a mess. AI is only as good as the data that you feed it. We already know this. It's well established fact. Rubbish in, rubbish out. People don't talk about that so much anymore. But if your data is scattered across 17,000 different spreadsheets with 3 legacy systems that don't speak to each other and everything's on someone's personal drive, but no one has access to it and no one actually knows where the real time data is, and someone in the data team is always talking about how it's unclean or incomplete or unverified, etc. What exactly are you going to train your AI on, right? Like, this is not a new concept. This idea of you have to have the right data to make better decisions. AI just makes that process a lot more expensive to mess up. So I've worked with organizations where a customer meant very different things for different parts of the organization. A sale meant different things for different parts of the organization. And so with different definitions in different systems, different teams counting different things, you can't build a model that can predict what customers will do next if you cannot define what a customer is consistently across your organization. So before you spend any money in AI, spend it on data governance. It is less exciting, and you probably are not going to want to write exciting LinkedIn posts about your achievements in getting your metadata in order, but it's the foundation on what everything else sits on. So if your data is a mess, don't invest in AI right now. Second thing, if you don't have a cheaper use case or a faster use case for AI from what you do now, just like don't do it. Because a lot of organizations are talking about how they want to innovate, they want to stay competitive, they want to do things faster, but that's not really like a business case, right? And importantly, if you don't have a good sense of the work that you would be doing with AI instead of having people do it and what you would get for that, it doesn't make sense. My example is you can say that right now we spend 400 hours summarizing our internal reports, documents for our leadership team and the board meeting. An AI tool can do this in 20 hours at 80% of the quality. And then the rest of the 20% is kind of editorial work that an analyst or someone else can do. That's quite specific, right? Like, you have a lot of clarity on what you will be doing. I think that you can go even further and say, what are you going to do with the remaining 380 hours that you now have? Because what most people do is fire people, and that's how they can prove that they've saved that amount of time. I think that's pretty short sighted because at some point you are going to need those people. And I do believe that getting rid of your workforce because you have AI is kind of like getting rid of your workforce because the internet exists. Like, it doesn't make that much sense. But you have to be able to show what you'll do with that 380-hour surplus that you now have. Because if you can't, what happens is that organizations then have a situation where people are just kind of overworking and they can't really figure out why, but they just stuff their calendars full of more, and it becomes kind of terrible. So if you can't point at something that the AI will make genuinely cheaper or faster, that you will not have to deal with the consequences of that technical debt and that institutional memory debt later on, you're just buying technology for the sake of having it, which is okay if you are an organization that's experimenting on principle and you're okay with not making any money off of it or losing money so that you can learn faster, all good. But if you're a charity, a council, a small, medium enterprise, a mid-sized incumbent, If you have a budget that you need to think about, and others who you're responsible to for that budget who are not super keen on experimentation for experimentation's sake, I would advise do not spend it on AI right now. Number three, if you have no definition of a return on investment, you're not going to make a return on investment. And so it seems fundamentally misguided to then assume that AI is going to give you something, because this, of course, ties to a previous point, and those who have read my book or watched my videos will know that I do believe that most business cases are a work of creative fiction that you do to unlock funding rather than to accurately predict future outcomes. There are also things that most organizations never really go back to see if something did or did not meet the conditions specified and the assumptions made in that business case. When I wrote Beyond Buy-in, that was true. It's now doubly true for AI because it feels almost as though the business cases right now are about vibes. It talks about making you more efficient, more productive. How? Again, if it saves time, what time? Whose time? If it reduces costs, is that just because you're removing people from the business? If that's the only lever that you have for making that work out from a financial perspective, something to rethink. There is also the question of how you're going to practically measure this. How will you collect the data? How will you clean the data? Who is going to do that? How will you represent and report the data? If you can't define what that return on investment is before you start, you probably will not know that you have it when you get there. You'll just have this expensive tool in a vague sense that things are better or that people are working more, but have no real sense of it. I found that this particularly applies to executive teams because executive teams seem to believe in AI much more than their employees do. It seems as though CEOs, CFOs, etc., are using AI in limited ways in their day-to-day work, and it's making them more efficient. And their assumption is that that should apply for all people within the organization. What we see instead is that there are legacy processes and systems that make that much more difficult for the average employee in an organization to adopt than it is for someone who's in the C-suite. So we should not assume that because it makes individual people more productive, it will make your organization more productive. Only 6% of them say that they're seeing any return on investment if you trust the data that's coming from McKinsey. And if you think about it, even on a national level, we haven't seen a tremendous increase in GDP from AI. We have not seen massive growth, development that's come about this. In some sense, it's just widened inequality and widened the gaps between the haves and the have-nots on the international front. So it feels safe to say that if you're a medium-sized organization and you can't point to what that return is, you're probably not going to have one. The next one is this question of whether people are using the stuff that you already have as a default. That's 4. If no one uses what you have right now, that's probably a good indication that they're not going to use in the future. So if you're in Microsoft 365 and people are not using Copilot for anything, that is a good indication that they're not going to use whatever fancy, interesting tool you're going to build for them. Similarly, if you are a G Suite organization and no one is using Gemini or Notebook LLM and they find no real value in using those tools, they're probably not going to find value in the tool that you're making, because in some senses, AI is a form of literacy that you need to keep working to improve, keep thinking about how you're going to grow in. You can't really do that if you're not experimenting and you're not trying things with the very low risk organizational tools that you already have embedded in your enterprise systems. If people aren't doing that, there is very little data or evidence to suggest that they're then going to start using tools you have custom built that aren't in their regular workflows, that aren't part of their everyday kind of work. And number 5, if you have no capabilities or desire or budget to do a process redesign, it's probably not going to work. I think that people often are buying these tools off the shelf or a plug and play, which never is that, right? But AI 100% is not in that. It's a trigger for process redesign because a broken process in that you introduce into an AI or that you ask an AI to do will just be a faster broken process. It'll be a broken process with fewer humans to correct what's happening along the path. So you will have the wrong decision made in half the time. Most organizations do not have people who know how to do the process redesign. They have people who are really good project managers usually. They can implement a plan. They have IT teams or digital teams who can deploy tools, deploy projects, etc. But there does need to be someone who can figure out how work actually gets done, identify the processes that are redundant, duplicative, unnecessary, design the end-to-end flow of work so that there are fewer spots where someone is breaking a documented process to phone a friend if they need some help with something, or bringing in some shadow IT because the IT team isn't doing things fast enough for them. AI bolted on to an existing solution is going to cause more chaos on top of the chaos because it takes people and humans out of the loop for the most part. If you identify with any of those 5 things, I would suggest genuinely think about whether this is the most important technology investment for this year. It's always going to be a good idea to invest in data, technical data, process redesign, monitoring and evaluation, and ROI, trying to work out how people are using what you have right now, figuring out whether you actually have a cheaper and a faster use case for AI. But that doesn't mean that you have to start pouring money into it right now. Ignore all of the fancy new tools and gadgets that are coming out from startups that are proliferating like mushrooms. We have to understand that every organization does not need to approach AI in the same way that we thought about outsourcing 15 years ago, where it was supposed to be this massive time saver. It was supposed to be this amazing way that your people could get back to doing important, valuable work because you're going to take all of this brunt work or low skilled work or repetitive work and ship it off to somewhere in the global south. Now, what we're seeing is that that was a terrible idea because people eventually had to bring many of those jobs back. They had to nearshore a lot more things. And what they found is that actually outsourcing employees in general was more expensive. They had less motivation and connection to the company. And because they had fewer opportunities for growth and learning, they simply didn't. And the quality of their work kind of plateaued. That's why outsourcing ended. It wasn't because it suddenly became much more expensive, although some of those factors did play into it. I think AI is going to be the same right now. I think Agile was the same 10 years ago, where we heard that it was going to be the future. We bought the tools, changed the job titles, changed the team structures, but the work itself didn't actually change. And so it remained a buzzword for many people and remains a buzzword for many people. I don't want your AI to go in the same direction as that because it's a lot more expensive than trying to do an agile transformation. So if you can fix the foundations first, go off, invest, fantastic. If you cannot, or you will not, or you can't get the budget to do that, I suggest learning to walk before you run. Thanks for watching, and look out for the next video in my AI series.